Yesterday after work, my dad said, "You won't be a real man until you pay off my mortgage debt. Real men take care of their fathers." He threw a $14,500 bill on the table with the words, "That's your debt for existing." When I laughed and replied, "No, no way," he exploded, "Then forget you had a father. You don't have to show up for Thanksgiving." I calmly said, "Fine, I was just about to spend it with people who really love me." As I left something on the table without saying a word. In the morning my aunt called in tears. "He's IN Hysterics on the floor. He found it. He's crying nonstop. Now everyone is begging me to answer. Please, just talk to him. He will sell the house if you don't come back." I don't usually talk about this kind of stuff, mostly because it sounds silly when I say it out loud. But for some reason I keep coming back to that summer. I was 16, it was the beginning of July, and the heat was the kind that makes the pavement shimmer like water. My parents were working long shifts back then, my dad at a construction site outside the city, and my mom was covering for a coworker at the hospital. My little brother, Max, had gone to stay with our grandparents in the countryside for a couple of weeks. So it was just me at home. At first, I loved the freedom. No yelling, no reminders to do the dishes, no noise from Max watching cartoons at full volume. Just me, my phone, some cold soda, and the kind of silence that feels like a blanket. I spent the first few days sleeping in until noon, eating frozen pizza and binge-watching whatever random show I stumbled upon. I remember one particular Wednesday. It was too hot to do anything. The apartment felt like an oven, the air conditioner barely worked, and the fan I had in my room only pushed warm air around. I was lying on the couch in the living room scrolling through my phone with one leg hanging over the armrest when I heard the front door click open. It wasn't loud. Just a soft, distinct metallic click and the slight creak of the hinges. I sat up. My first thought was that maybe Mom had come home early or maybe she forgot something. I called out, "Mom?" No answer. I waited a few seconds, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no rustling of bags, no sound of keys being dropped in the bowl by the entrance. I got up and walked to the hallway. The door was closed like always. Locked. I even tugged at the handle just to make sure. It didn't budge. I shook my head, chalking it up to the neighbors. Sound carries weird in our building sometimes. Maybe the lady upstairs slammed her door and it echoed down. I went back to the couch, opened a new soda, and tried to push the weird feeling out of my mind. But I couldn't help noticing little things after that. Like how the floorboards creaked faintly in the hallway when I knew I hadn't walked there. Or how my bedroom door would be slightly ajar in the morning when I was sure I had closed it the night before. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that couldn't be explained. Still, the sense of unease started creeping in. A few days later, I woke up around 3 a.m. because I heard what sounded like footsteps in the living room. Not heavy, more like a slow, careful shuffle. I sat up holding my breath. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I told myself it was probably the neighbors again. Or the fan in my room making the curtains move and cast weird shadows. I stayed in bed, trying not to move, listening for any more sounds. Nothing. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I checked the living room. Everything was in its place. TV off. Couch pillows exactly how I left them. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly off, like the air had been disturbed. That weekend, I was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. My phone buzzed with a text from a friend asking if I wanted to come hang out. I typed back that I couldn't. I didn't even know why I lied. I just didn't want to leave the apartment. As strange as it sounds, I felt like if I left, I might come back to find it completely different. Or maybe I wouldn't want to come back at all. By Sunday evening, the atmosphere had shifted. I don't know how else to explain it. The apartment, which usually felt familiar and boring, suddenly seemed like a place I had never really paid attention to before. Every sound seemed louder. The creak of the fridge door. The buzz of the overhead light. Even the way the walls looked pale yellow with little cracks near the ceiling made me feel like they were somehow watching. Again, I know how this sounds. But I'm not saying anything supernatural happened. I never saw a ghost or heard whispers or anything like that. Just a creeping sense that I wasn't entirely alone. I started leaving the hallway light on at night. Not because I was scared, I told myself, but just because it was easier to see if I needed to get up for water. But in the back of my mind, I knew I was lying to myself. The strangest thing was how my habits started to shift. I began double-checking locks, closing all doors behind me, turning off lights one at a time while watching my reflection in the microwave door. I avoided mirrors at night, especially the one in the bathroom. It sounds ridiculous, but I always felt like if I looked too long, I might catch something behind me that wasn't supposed to be there. By the end of that first week, I didn't feel relaxed anymore. I was on edge, constantly alert for sounds. And yet, nothing ever really happened. There was no big moment, no scream, no breaking glass. Just a slow, steady buildup of tension that settled in my chest and wouldn't go away. I didn't tell my parents. What would I even say? Hey, I think the apartment feels weird? They just laugh and tell me to get some fresh air. Looking back, maybe I should have gone outside more. Maybe I should have stayed over at a friend's place or visited my grandparents too. But I didn't. I stayed. I told myself it was fine, that it was all in my head. But deep down, I think I knew that something had changed. The apartment hadn't physically shifted, but I had. And something about that silence, about being truly, completely alone for the first time, started to mess with me in a way I didn't expect. I think that's when the real story began. When I left Emily's place that night, the air felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was just the weight of everything that had happened, what I saw in that photo, the way her mood shifted like she knew more than she let on. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on nerves or a long day. But deep down, something didn't sit right. The next few days were a strange mix of routine and distraction. I still went to work, still stopped by the corner cafe for my usual black coffee, still smiled at the same tired faces. But every idle moment was filled with one thought: what the hell did I actually see in that picture? I couldn't explain it. It wasn't just a weird coincidence or a trick of the light. That was me in the background, older, maybe 10 years, with a few lines on my face I hadn't earned yet. But it was me. And I was staring directly at the camera like I knew it would capture me. I didn't bring it up to Emily again. After how she reacted the first time, I didn't want to push. But something changed between us. There was distance even when we were sitting next to each other. She laughed less. She didn't hold my hand the same way. I figured it might just be her mood, but there were times I caught her watching me like she was trying to read something written between the lines. Then, one night, she texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, if you're free tomorrow, want to come over? There's something I want to show you." No emoji. No follow-up. Just that. I stared at the message for a few minutes before replying. "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" She just replied, "I'll explain when you're here." When I got to her place the next day, it was already dark. Her house looked the same on the outside, but something about it felt colder. She opened the door quickly, almost like she'd been waiting right behind it. "You came," she said, stepping aside. Her voice was soft, her expression unreadable. "Of course. You all right?" She gave a small nod. "Yeah. I want to show you something. But I need you to promise you'll keep an open mind." I raised an eyebrow. "Emily, what is this about?" She didn't answer. Instead, she led me through the living room and into the hallway, past the family portraits and down toward the door I hadn't noticed before. It was narrow and painted the same beige as the wall, easy to miss. She pulled out a key from her pocket and unlocked it. It creaked open to reveal a set of old wooden stairs descending into what looked like a basement. "You've never mentioned this," I said, peering down into the dimness. "I know. It's not somewhere I go often. My dad used to work down there. After he passed, I just left it alone." I hesitated. "Emily, what exactly are you showing me?" Again, she didn't answer. She just flicked on a light switch and a dim bulb at the bottom flickered to life. Without another word, she started walking down. I followed. The stairs groaned under our weight. At the bottom, the basement was colder than I expected. The air felt stale, filled with dust and memories. Old furniture lined the walls, covered with sheets. There was a workbench in the corner, cluttered with old tools, empty jars, a soldering iron, and what looked like some kind of homemade circuit board. She walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled open the bottom drawer. From it, she retrieved a small box, maybe the size of a shoebox, and set it on the workbench. "What's in there?" I asked, watching her carefully. She opened it slowly. Inside was a collection of photographs, old and new, most of them faded or curling at the edges. She handed me one. It was a photo of a man and a woman standing outside what looked like a university building. The man was older, white beard, wire-framed glasses, a serious face. The woman was young, in her 20s. I looked closer. It was Emily. But not the Emily I knew. Her hair was longer, her style different. And she looked different. Sharper somehow. Harder. Like life had carved her out a little more. "That's not me," she said quietly, watching my face. I looked up. "What do you mean? It looks like me, right? But that photo was taken before I was born. My dad told me about her, my mother. She died before I was old enough to remember. But that's her." I blinked. "You're telling me your mom looked exactly like you?" "Exactly. Down to the scar on my left eyebrow. Same laugh, same voice. My dad said she even walked like me. But here's the thing, she wasn't related to me. Not by blood. I was adopted. My head started to spin. Emily, I don't know what to say. She pulled out another photo. This one was grainier, more recent. A group of people in what looked like a lab. Standing in the back, half in shadow, was someone who looked just like me. Not similar, identical. Same haircut. Same posture. I found this after my dad passed, she whispered. I've been trying to figure out what it means. And then I saw your face. I sat down hard on the edge of an old trunk, staring at the photo. Emily, what are you saying? That we're, what? Copies? Clones? She shook her head quickly. I don't know. Maybe not that. But there's something going on here. Something bigger than coincidence. And I think my dad was part of it. I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. This is insane. I know, she said. But it's real. And I need to know why. Don't you? The basement felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were leaning in. I looked around at the old electronics, the boxes of documents, the photo in my hand. I didn't know what we'd found, but I knew we couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, after I left Emily's basement, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those photos. The one of her mother, her twin in another time. The one of the lab where someone who looked exactly like me stood in the shadows. My hands shook every time I thought about it. I wasn't sure what disturbed me more, the possibility that someone out there looked exactly like me or the fact that Emily had known about this for weeks and said nothing until now. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark, staring at a cold cup of tea. My apartment felt hollow. Like someone had removed something essential from the air and everything left behind was thinner, fainter, off. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. A lookalike. An old photo mislabeled. Some bizarre family resemblance that had gotten lost in time. But that didn't explain the photo Emily had taken at the museum. The one where I was in the background. 10 years older. Staring right into the camera. I finally fell asleep sometime after 4 a.m. sitting upright on my couch with the TV on low. When I woke up, my neck ached and the sunlight stung my eyes. I called in sick to work. I needed answers. I texted Emily. Hey, can we talk? I want to see those documents again. She replied instantly. Come over. I found something else. The second I walked into her house, I could tell she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red, her hair tied back messily, her voice lower than usual. She didn't say much. Just led me back to the basement where the smell of dust and old wood now felt strangely familiar. She handed me a small, leather-bound notebook. A journal with cracked edges and yellowed pages. This was tucked inside a hollowed-out book in my dad's office, she said. I must have missed it before. The handwriting inside was tight, precise. Each page was dated and the entries spanned years. I flipped to the first page. April 3rd, 1998. We found something we weren't supposed to. Or maybe we were never meant to find it this soon. But there it is, buried under layers of static, chance, and noise. A pattern. A loop. The words didn't make sense to me at first. I kept reading. There were sketches, lines of code, diagrams, rough maps. The notes described a theory, something about time not being linear but layered. Like overlapping sheets of music. Sometimes, if the conditions were right, things could bleed through. It still sounded like nonsense. But the more I read, the more it unnerved me. Emily sat beside me silently. Her knee was bouncing, fingers twitching like she wanted to speak but didn't know how to start. I turned another page. June 12, 2002. Saw her again. She looked the same. Still no aging. Still unaware? Or pretending? Then another. September 5, 2004. He's here now. The resemblance is exact. Impossible. It's him, down to the scar on his hand. But younger. Unaware. I froze. There's a thin scar on the side of my right hand from when I slipped on ice as a kid. I never noticed it much, but it's there. And here, in this notebook written 2 decades ago, someone described me like they'd seen me before. Emily, this has to be a joke, I said. This sounds insane. I thought so too, she said quietly. But keep reading. The next few pages were filled with names. Places. Some were crossed out, others circled. I recognized a few, the university where Emily's father had worked, the company where I interned years ago, even the museum we visited. It was like someone had been tracking us. Or people who looked like us. Then I found something worse. A photo had been paperclipped to the last page. It was old, bent, but clear enough. It showed a man, maybe in his late 50s, walking through a street fair. The angle was high, probably taken from a window or balcony. There were dozens of people in the shot, but the focus was unmistakable. It was me. Not kind of me. Not close. It was me. Just older. Gray in my beard, deeper lines in my face. Same eyes. Same scar. I dropped the photo like it burned. Emily picked it up gently, looking at it like she'd seen a ghost. That's the guy in the museum photo, she whispered. That's the one I saw watching us. I don't understand, I said, my voice dry. Is someone stalking me? Some guy who looks like me. I don't think he's stalking you, she said. I think he might be you. I stood up fast, knocking my chair backward. No. Come on. That's not possible. She didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. I felt like the walls were closing in again. I couldn't breathe. I left the house in a daze, the journal still clutched in my hand. I walked without thinking past the cafe, past the bookstore, through side streets and alleys I hadn't noticed before. I didn't stop until I was sitting on a bench near the edge of town, overlooking the river. I stared at the water for what felt like hours. I tried to make sense of it all. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe Emily's dad had been unwell. Maybe there was a whole line of strangers who coincidentally looked like us. But the photos, the notes, the museum, the man with my face. There were too many maybes, and not enough explanations. That night, I couldn't stay in my apartment. I packed a small bag and checked into a motel 2 towns over. I needed distance, time to think, to breathe. But even there, I couldn't sleep, because in the corner of the motel room, on the small wooden desk, there was a single object I hadn't packed, the journal, and written in the margin of the last page, in a darker pen than the rest, was a note I swear hadn't been there before. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Find the others. I stayed in that motel room for 3 more nights. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I turned off my phone, didn't check my email, avoided everything familiar. I needed to think, to breathe. But mostly, I needed to decide whether I was ready to chase something I didn't fully understand. That line in the journal, you're not the first. You won't be the last. Find the others kept running through my head on repeat. I'd read it 100 times, trying to figure out if it had always been there or if someone had somehow slipped into my room to write it. Either way, I couldn't ignore it. On the 4th morning, I packed up and drove back home. My apartment felt smaller than ever. Like the walls knew something I didn't. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat at my desk flipping through the journal, page by page, until I noticed something I'd missed before. In the back of the notebook, folded between the last few pages, was a list. First names only with dates and vague locations. Some had question marks beside them. One had a line through it. But 2 names stood out. The first, Leo, Portland, January 2020. The second, Sarah, Chicago, July 2019. The dates were close. The same window as that photo of me in the museum. I couldn't explain it, but something told me they had answers I didn't. The next morning, I booked a flight to Portland. Leo wasn't hard to find. It turned out he worked at a local college teaching digital media. I emailed him from a burner address, something vague and polite. Just said I had questions about a mutual acquaintance, an old professor, and was hoping to talk. I didn't expect a reply. But 3 hours later, he sent one back. If this is about the notebook, meet me tomorrow. 3 p.m., Hawthorne Bridge. That one sentence stopped me cold. I didn't mention the notebook in my email. I showed up at the bridge early. It was cold and windy, the river choppy below. I waited, hands in my coat pockets, scanning every person who walked by. Then I saw him. Leo looked like he hadn't slept in days. Late 30s, tall, wire-rimmed glasses, nervous posture. He walked up slowly, looked me over, then gave a tight nod. I figured someone would come eventually, he said. We sat on a nearby bench facing the water. I didn't know where to start, so I handed him the journal. He opened it without hesitation, flipping straight to the back like he knew where he was going. Same copy, he muttered. Or close enough. What do you mean, same copy? I asked. Leo turned to face me. I had one just like this, he said. Back in 2020. It showed up in my office mailbox. No note, no explanation. Just appeared. I thought it was some kind of art project at first, but then, well, I started seeing things. People who looked like me. A guy with my exact tattoo working at a bookstore in another city. A woman who stared at me like she knew me from another life. So you think this is real? Leo shrugged. I don't know what real even means anymore. But it's happening. Not just to you and me. I've talked to 2 others. One in New York, one in Toronto. They all found something, a notebook, a photo, a recording. Always left somewhere they couldn't ignore. And always the same message, you're not the first. I sat in silence for a while. The wind off the river made my eyes water, but I didn't blink. What do they want from us? I finally asked. That's the part nobody knows, Leo said. There's no clear mission, no big reveal. Just breadcrumbs. Clues that seem to lead nowhere except deeper into whatever this is. He paused, looked around, then leaned in slightly. But here's what I do know, we're being watched. I stiffened. You mean followed? No. Watched, he said. There's a pattern to it. Every time I get close to something, dig through old records, track down a name, I start noticing people. Same guy on the bus 3 days in a row. Same woman at the cafe across from my apartment. Not obvious, but not subtle either. Like they want you to know someone's there without knowing who they are. We sat in silence again. My thoughts felt like static. After about an hour, Leo gave me a burner number and told me to stay in touch. Don't try to chase the truth all at once, he warned. It'll drive you insane. Just pay attention. The right questions come when you're ready. Before he left, he handed me a folded piece of paper. On it was a name and address in Chicago. Sarah, he said. She's careful, but she'll talk. Just don't show up unannounced. Email first. I flew to Chicago 2 days later. Sarah was different. She was blunt, sharp, and didn't waste time on pleasantries. Her apartment was sparse, just books, file folders, maps, and one corkboard absolutely covered in notes. She'd built an entire timeline, dozens of entries, names, even red strings connecting incidents across decades. She didn't greet me with suspicion. She greeted me with relief. I've been waiting for someone else to find me, she said, handing me a cup of black coffee. I thought I was losing my mind. But if there are more of us. There are, I said. And we're being watched. She nodded like she'd expected that. Yeah, I know. We talked for hours. She'd been collecting stories like ours for years. People who swore they saw older versions of themselves, or people who died but were later spotted alive. A man who claimed he'd lived the same day twice. A woman who found her own handwriting in a journal she didn't remember writing. None of it made sense. All of it sounded too strange to be coincidence. But I believed her, because it matched my own experience too perfectly to ignore. Before I left, she gave me one final piece. I think it's about decisions, she said. Moments where our lives could have gone one way or another. These echoes or shadows or whatever they are, they show up around big forks in the road. Like someone wants to see what we'll choose. Who? I asked. She shrugged. No idea. But maybe the point isn't who. Maybe it's why. I flew home the next morning. I hadn't slept in days, but I didn't feel tired. Just wired. Like my brain couldn't shut off. I got home, opened my apartment door, and froze. There, sitting on my kitchen table, on top of a clean white envelope, was a Polaroid photo. It was me, but not the me I am now. This version had gray in his beard, bags under his eyes. He was sitting on a bench by the river, staring straight at the camera. And in the corner of the photo, in fading ink, was a single line. This isn't the end. It's the beginning.